these group of lectures that you're having on the periodic table and anions and cations and combination remedies into a certain perspective. If talking about remedies in this way gives you some insight, triggers some neurons while you're seeing a patient, that's the whole point. It's not the bottom line. It's not the only way to do it. What I'm hoping is that we're evolving theories or observations that will be useful to us as we go along, certainly in the big field of homeopathy. You know, we've separated these remedies into, or these elements into the ones on this side, and some of these stand by themselves, some of them don't. The ones on this side, and some of them stand by themselves, and some of them don't. And then, you know, they can join together in all these different ways. The most valuable guideline for finding coming up with one of these synthetic remedies is that while you're taking the case, you really have a strong feeling of natrum. You see natrum in this case. It's natrum. And then something else they're saying, you know, it's a carbon. Whoa, it's not natrum muriaticum, maybe it's natrum carbonicum. And then, in the case, as the case unfolds, without you having to come up with anything, they spontaneously have several keynotes that you know of natrum carbonicum. So both individual threads seem well identified, and several elements of the synthetic remedy. And natrum carbonicum certainly stands as a big remedy on its own, but you know, they had sunstroke. It all started from sunstroke. They can't digest milk, or any of the other combinations. Knowing their keynotes, to know that when you see these two strong threads of the different ions and more than one particular keynote of the synthesized remedy, that's your best guideline for giving natrum carbonicum instead of natrum muriaticum. Even though some of the elements of the case, when you look them up, just say in the repertory natrum muriaticum. So this is where the issue comes up, isn't it? If everything you look up in the repertory says natrum carbonicum, you don't need to think this way. That's, you know, you're just going to plug it into the repertory and that's what's going to come out. The second way is you're taking the case and you're absolutely confident as you're going through the case of what the appropriate remedy would be. And then near the end of taking the case, or it could be even, you know, but this is what typically happens, you go, ha, you know, if this isn't arsenicum, homeopathy doesn't work. And and then the patient says at the end of the, and so, you know, you tend to be more on the warm or the chilly side, and they say, oh, hot, I am so hot. You can't give them arsenicum album if they are so hot. You can't. You have to come up with a hot arsenicum, and that's what these elements help us to do. A lesser one would be that it's not a violation per se, but that a particular keynote or physical pathology, more particularly the physical pathology, points you toward the smaller remedy. So someone who is calcarea carbonicum, but they have a real problem with exostoses, would be calcarea floricum, or terrible problem with stiff neck and sighing, but you really don't have the whole calc phos picture, but those are the main problems. The least likely basis on which to pick a synthesized remedy is just that you see the representation of the two elements. Sankaran has in his book a different kind of categorization of the periodic table than Jan Scholten does. You know, what they're looking for is for themes based on the way these elements are laid out, themes that you can go from left to right or from the top down. And Rajans are based more on something that we can observe really just in the chemical properties of the elements, namely the ones on the far side over there, those two first groups, don't stand alone very well. We don't have a calcarea remedy. calcarea metallicum. It's not a metal. It won't stand alone. It's really just a cation. Natrum cannot stand alone. The different affinity for a human relationship that's represented from the left side to the right side of the chart. On the left side, they have the strongest need for relationship, intimate connection. And the middle part of the chart is more characterized by a need for stability in their relationships, so they can count on their relationships for support, security. And the farther right-hand side of the chart is more just concerned with seeking stability, not the nurturing part of it, or a protective part of it. And the next remedy for us to talk about are the calcarea series. The central theme is their individual task and individual responsibility for your task. What's the internal feeling in calcarea? Vulnerability. What kind of vulnerability? There's several. There's sanity, and so the health of their mind. What else? Survival, the health of their body. The house, money. But what's the vulnerability around their mind? That others will observe them. It's taking an individual responsibility in a context of a greater world. I'm doing this, I hope I'm doing it right. I hope I'm doing it right because I could live or die based on it, and others could notice. If the case doesn't have some degree of fear and anxiety, it's not calcarea. So what are all the calcarea fears you can think of? Poverty, future, something could happen. Doctors. They not only can withdraw into their shell, they can just withdraw and wait. It's like a defensive, they're good defensive drivers. They're defensive defensive drivers in the world of emotions as well as cars. They're good vigilance. Calcareas are fat, usually weak. And this is an interesting case where some of the salts do something unexpected. The heaviest calcarea is Calcarea arsenicosum. It's an unusual remedy, but it's a good remedy for very heavy women at menopause with terrible hot flashes. Calcareas in general are worse from any exertion, particularly the exertion of uphill. As you know, calcarea affects the bones, joints, metabolism. There's swelling of breasts and other glands, growths on the skin, constipation, anemia. So you put these growths and the anemia together and you have heavy periods and anemia resulting from fibroids. It's like strike one, strike two, strike three. That's Calcarea carbonicum, unless you have to prove it's not that to give another remedy. Maybe use belladonna acutely, but it's an important remedy in that situation. A couple other remedies in that line. We're getting into the metals. Chrome shines. So they feel observed and embarrassed on behalf of either themselves or others. Helpful, pleasing. And their issue is around appreciation. Wanting to be appreciated. Okay. Manganum, Sagaran compares it to Staphylos agria. More suppressed than Staphylos agria. Staphylos agria has feelings which they hold inside and struggle to keep intact, and manganum doesn't even know they have them. Manganum has a particular strange keynote, which is symptoms better from lying down. Cough. Now you get somebody who has a cough better from lying down. That's unusual. The way they respond to this suppression is really sort of on the negative side. They become bitter, sad, complaining. So you've had some ferrum stuff, right? It's a metal of industry, a metal of weapons. So it's both a remedy for accomplishment and conflict.